The rain battered the roof of the old craftsman house, each drop a hammer against Caleb's heart. He stood in the living room, staring at the eviction notice trembling in his hands, the words blurring through tears he refused to let fall. At 45, he'd never felt so betrayed, not by his nephew, Jamie, but by the woman who'd stolen his trust and their home. Caleb had raised Jamie since he was 6, when a car accident took his sister and her husband. The boy's wide, frightened eyes had looked to Caleb for safety, and he'd sworn to be more than an unclean father. Their life in Willow Creek, a quiet suburb outside Seattle, wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs, a home filled with laughter, late-night talks, and the smell of Caleb's burned attempts at pancakes. Jamie, now 23, was the son Caleb never had, and their bond was unbreakable. Or so he thought. It started with Sarah, Jamie's fiancée. She swept into their lives 2 years ago, all charm and bright smiles, her blonde hair catching the light like she was born to be adored. Caleb welcomed her, happy to see Jamie's eyes light up. But beneath her warmth, Sarah's gaze lingered too long on Caleb, not with affection, but with calculation. He didn't see it then. He was too busy being the proud uncle, the man who'd raised a kid into a kind, thoughtful adult. Jamie was everything Caleb wasn't: openly gay, confident in his identity, and unafraid to love. Caleb, who'd buried his own truth deep, envied that freedom. Sarah's true colors emerged slowly. A comment here, a smirk there. "You're so devoted to Jamie," she'd say, her tone laced with something sharp. Caleb brushed it off. He was family, not a rival. But when Jamie proposed, Sarah's mask slipped. She began whispering to Jamie, planting doubts. "Why does Caleb still live with you? Isn't it weird?" Caleb overheard her one night, her voice dripping with disdain. "He's not your real dad, Jamie. He's just clinging." The words cut deeper than Caleb could admit. He'd sacrificed everything for Jamie's savings, his social life, his own chance at love. He'd come out to no one, not even Jamie, fearing it might complicate their bond. Caleb was gay, but he'd locked that part of himself away, convinced it didn't matter as long as Jamie was happy. Now, Sarah was using that sacrifice against him. The eviction notice was her final blow. Jamie had inherited the house from his parents, but Sarah convinced him to put her name on the deed after their engagement. "It's for our future," she'd said, and Jamie, blinded by love, agreed. Caleb trusted Jamie's judgment, never imagining Sarah would exploit it. But she did. Last week, she'd called Caleb a freak to his face, accusing him of unnatural attachment to Jamie. The next day, the notice arrived. She'd convinced Jamie to sell the house there to fund her dream wedding and a new life, one that didn't include Caleb. Caleb sank onto the couch, the paper crumpling in his fist. The house was more than brick and mortar. It was the last piece of Jamie's parents, of their family. He'd painted every wall, fixed every leak, and carved Jamie's name into the backyard fence when he was 10. Now, Sarah was tearing it all away. Worse, Jamie hadn't spoken to him in days, avoiding his calls, his texts. Caleb didn't know if it was shame or Sarah's influence, but the silence was deafening. He stood, wiping his eyes, and walked to Jamie's old room. It still held his posters, his books, the guitar Caleb had bought him for his 16th birthday. Caleb's chest ached. He wasn't just losing the house. He was losing Jamie. He'd raised him, loved him, but Sarah's poison had seeped into their bond, twisting it into something ugly. Caleb didn't know how to fight back. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a man who'd given everything to a boy who called him dad in every way but blood. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Caleb froze. It was late, nearly midnight, and the rain was relentless. He opened the door to find Jamie standing there, soaked, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. "Caleb," he whispered, voice breaking. "I messed up. I messed up so bad." Caleb's heart lurched. He wanted to pull Jamie into his arms, to fix this like he'd fixed every scraped knee and broken dream. But something held him back, fear. Maybe. Or the weight of Sarah's words still burning in his mind. "What happened?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Jamie stepped inside, dripping onto the hardwood. "She lied to me," he said, his voice raw. "Sarah. She said you were trying to control me, that you were wrong." I didn't believe her. Not really. But I let her convince me to sell the house. I thought it was for us, for our future. But it's not. It's for her. Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to shake Jamie and ask why he hadn't trusted him. But the boy looked so broken, so lost. "Why didn't you talk to me?" Caleb asked, softer than he meant. Jamie's eyes met his, filled with guilt. "I was scared." She made it sound like you were holding me back. Like I couldn't move forward with you here. He choked on a sob. "But this is our home. Caleb. You're my family. I don't know how I let her do this." Caleb wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. Sarah's words had planted a seed, even in him. Was he too close? Too much? He'd raised Jamie, but maybe he'd overstepped, clung too tightly. The thought made his stomach churn. He reached out, hesitant, and touched Jamie's shoulder. "We'll figure it out," he said, though he didn't know how. "We always do." But as Jamie nodded, tears streaming down his face, Caleb knew it wouldn't be that simple. Sarah wasn't done. She'd taken their home, their trust, and she wouldn't stop until she'd taken everything. Caleb had to fight not just for the house, but for Jamie, for their family. And for the first time in his life, he had to face the truth he'd buried to save his nephew. He might have to finally be honest about who he was. The rain didn't let up, mirroring the turmoil in Caleb's chest as he sat across from Jamie at the kitchen table. The dim light cast shadows on Jamie's face, making him look younger, like the boy who'd once clung to Caleb after nightmares. But this wasn't a nightmare they could wake from. Sarah's betrayal was real, and the eviction notice on the counter was proof. "I didn't see it," Jamie said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stared at his hands, twisting the engagement ring on his finger. "She was so perfect. She made me feel like I could have everything: a family, a future. But it was all a lie." Caleb leaned forward, his calloused hands clasped tightly. "What did she do, Jamie? Tell me everything." He needed to understand, to piece together how the woman they'd both trusted had turned their world upside down. Jamie took a shaky breath. "It started small. She'd make these comments about you, like how you were always around, how it wasn't normal for an uncle to be so involved. I defended you, Caleb, I swear. But she kept pushing, saying I needed to grow up, to let go of the past. She said the house was holding us back, that we could start fresh with the money from selling it." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She showed me listings for condos, talked about a big wedding, a new life. I thought she wanted us. But then I found the papers." "What papers?" Caleb's voice was steady, but his heart raced. Jamie pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket, sliding it across the table. Caleb opened it, his eyes scanning the documents inside. Bank statements, real estate contracts, all in Sarah's name. She'd opened a separate account, funneling money from the house sale into it. Worse, she'd taken out a loan against the property before the sale, claiming it was for renovations. Caleb's blood ran cold. She'd planned this from the start. She's been lying to me for months, Jamie said, his voice cracking. I confronted her tonight, and she didn't even deny it. She just laughed, said I was naive to think she'd settle for a small-town life with me. She called you. She called you a freak again. Said you were the reason I couldn't move on. Caleb's fists clenched. The word stung, not just for its cruelty, but for the truth it twisted. He'd hidden his sexuality, not out of shame, but to protect Jamie, to avoid complicating their life. He'd grown up in a time when being gay in a small town meant whispers, judgment, or worse. He'd seen friends ostracized, families torn apart. So he'd stayed silent, pouring all his love into raising Jamie. But Sarah had weaponized that silence, turning his sacrifice into something sinister. I'm sorry, Jamie said, his eyes pleading. I should have listened to you. I should have seen her for what she was. Caleb wanted to comfort him, but anger simmered beneath his pain. Jamie had let Sarah manipulate him, had signed away their home without a second thought. Why didn't you tell me? Caleb asked, his voice sharper than he intended. You let her into our lives, Jamie. You let her take everything. Jamie flinched, and Caleb regretted his tone instantly. But the hurt was too raw. He stood, pacing the small kitchen, the walls closing in. This house was their history, every dent in the floor, every photo on the fridge. He'd rebuilt his life here after his sister's death, and now it was slipping away because of a woman who saw them as obstacles. I'm going to fix this, Jamie said, standing too. I'll talk to a lawyer, see if we can stop the sale. I won't let her win. Caleb stopped pacing, looking at Jamie. The determination in his nephew's eyes was familiar. It was the same fire he'd had as a kid, refusing to give up on anything he loved. But Caleb knew it wouldn't be easy. Sarah was cunning, and she'd already outmaneuvered them once. We need to be smart, Caleb said. She's got the upper hand. We need proof, something to show what she's done. Jamie nodded, but his shoulders sagged. I don't even know where to start. She's got all the documents. And I trusted her. Caleb's heart softened. He crossed the room and pulled Jamie into a hug, the kind he hadn't given since Jamie was a teenager. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice firm. But you need to be honest with me from now on. No more secrets. Jamie clung to him, nodding against his shoulder. For a moment, they were just a father and son, holding on to what mattered. But Caleb knew the fight was just beginning. Sarah wasn't just after their house, she was after their bond, their family. And Caleb would be damned if he let her win. The next morning, Caleb drove to the local library, a place he hadn't visited since Jamie's school projects. He spent hours researching real estate laws, fraud, and anything that could help. His eyes burned from staring at the screen, but he found a lead, a local lawyer, Maria Torres, known for taking on tough cases. She was expensive, but Caleb had a small savings account, money he'd set aside for Jamie's future. He'd use every cent if it meant saving their home. When he called Maria, her voice was warm but no nonsense. Send me everything you've got, she said. If this woman's committed fraud, we'll nail her. But it's not just about the house, Caleb. You need to protect your relationship with Jamie. That's what she's really targeting. Caleb hung up, her words echoing. Sarah wasn't just a thief. She was a predator, exploiting Jamie's trust and Caleb's hidden truth. He drove home, the rain finally clearing, and found Jamie in the backyard, staring at the fence where Caleb had carved his name years ago. I'm not losing this, Jamie said, his voice steady. I'm not losing you. Caleb nodded, a lump in his throat. For the first time, he felt a spark of hope. But as they stood there, the for sale sign creaking in the wind, Caleb knew the battle was far from over. Sarah was still out there, and she wasn't going to give up without a fight. Caleb sat in Maria Torres's office, the air thick with the scent of coffee and old books. The lawyer, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bob, flipped through the documents Caleb and Jamie had gathered. Bank statements, emails, even a screenshot of a text from Sarah bragging about her new start. Maria's pen tapped the desk, each tap a metronome to Caleb's racing heart. "This is solid," Maria said, her voice steady. "Sarah's been sloppy moving money into a personal account, taking out loans without Jamie's full consent. It's fraud, plain and simple. But we need more to stop the sale. The buyer's already in escrow, and they're not going to back out easily." Caleb glanced at Jamie, who sat beside him, his hands fidgeting. The boy looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. Caleb felt a pang of guilt. He'd been so focused on the house, he hadn't checked in on Jamie's heart. Losing Sarah wasn't just losing a fiancé. It was losing a dream. "What do we do?" Jamie asked, his voice small. "Can we get the house back?" Maria leaned forward. "We file for an injunction to halt the sale, citing fraud. We'll need to prove Sarah manipulated you, Jamie, and that she misrepresented the property's ownership. Caleb, your role as Jamie's guardian complicates things. The court might see you as a tenant, not an owner, which weakens your claim unless we can show your emotional and financial stake." Caleb nodded, though the words stung. Tenant. He'd poured his life into that house. But legally, he was just a man who'd raised a boy. "What about Sarah?" he asked. "Can we go after her?" Maria's eyes gleamed. "Oh, we will. I'm digging into her background. If she's done this before, we'll find it. People like her don't change their stripes." As they left the office, Caleb felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile. The drive home was quiet, the Seattle skyline blurred by a fresh drizzle. Jamie stared out the window, his silence heavy. Caleb wanted to reach out, but the distance between them felt wider than ever. Sarah's lies had done more than steal their home. They'd cracked the foundation of their trust. Back at the house, Caleb found Jamie in the garage, sorting through old boxes. "What are you doing?" he asked, stepping over a pile of childhood toys. "Looking for something," Jamie muttered, pulling out a photo album. He flipped it open, revealing pictures of them Jamie's first bike, Caleb teaching him to fish, their goofy Halloween costumes. "I needed to remember us before her." Caleb's throat tightened. He knelt beside Jamie, looking at a photo of them at Jamie's high school graduation. Caleb's arm was around Jamie, both of them beaming. "We're still us," Caleb said softly. "She can't take that." Jamie's eyes welled up. "I let her, though. I let her make me doubt you. I'm so sorry, Caleb." Caleb pulled him into a hug, the album pressed between them. "You're my kid," he said, his voice thick. "Nothing changes that. Not her. Not this house. Nothing." But as they sat there, surrounded by memories, Caleb knew they couldn't stay frozen in the past. Maria called that evening with news. Sarah had a history. A divorce 5 years ago. A lawsuit from an ex who claimed she'd drained their joint account. It wasn't enough to win the case, but it was a start. Maria was working on a deposition to confront Sarah in court, but they needed more evidence, something personal, something damning. Caleb decided to take a risk. He remembered Sarah's old laptop, left in the guest room after she'd moved in briefly. Jamie had kept it, hoping she'd come back for it. Caleb powered it on, heart pounding. It wasn't password-protected, another sign of Sarah's arrogance. He found emails, dozens of them, between Sarah and a real estate agent named Vince. They detailed her plan: sell the house, pocket the profit, and leave Jamie behind. One email made Caleb's blood boil. The uncle's a problem, but he's too spineless to fight. I'll handle him. Caleb printed the emails and sent them to Maria. It was a breakthrough, but it came at a cost. Reading Sarah's words her cold, calculated betrayal shattered Jamie. He locked himself in his room, refusing to talk. Caleb stood outside the door, helpless, wondering if he'd pushed too far. The next day, Maria called again. "We've got a court date in 2 weeks," she said. "But Sarah's lawyer is good. She's claiming you coerced Jamie into keeping the house. Caleb, she's painting you as the villain." Caleb's heart sank. He'd spent his life avoiding conflict, hiding who he was to keep the peace. Now, his silence was being used against him. He looked at Jamie's closed door, the weight of their fight heavier than ever. He had to be strong, not just for the house, but for Jamie, for their family. That night, Caleb made a decision. He knocked on Jamie's door, his voice steady. "We need to talk. Not just about the house. About me. About who I am." Jamie opened the door, his eyes wary but curious. Caleb took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He'd hidden this truth for decades. But if he was going to fight Sarah, he had to fight for himself too. "Jamie," he said, "I'm gay." The words hung in the air, heavier than Caleb had expected. Jamie stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes wide, searching Caleb's face. For a moment, Caleb feared he'd miscalculated, that this truth would drive a deeper wedge between them. But then Jamie's expression softened, and he stepped forward, pulling Caleb into a fierce hug. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jamie asked, his voice muffled against Caleb's shoulder. "All this time, you kept it from me." Caleb's throat burned. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing prepared him for the vulnerability of saying it out loud. "I didn't want to complicate things," he said, pulling back to meet Jamie's eyes. "You were my priority. I didn't want my life me trithto make yours harder. Growing up, I saw what happened to people like me. I thought hiding it was the best way to protect you." Jamie shook his head, tears spilling over. "You didn't have to protect me from you. You're my dad, Caleb. You're the one who was always there. I wouldn't have cared." The word dad hit Caleb like a wave, washing away years of fear. He'd never let himself hope for that title. Not fully. But hearing it now, in this moment, gave him strength he didn't know he had. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have trusted you." They sat on Jamie's bed, the room a time capsule of his teenage years. Caleb told him everything growing up in the 90s. The slurs he'd heard, the friends he'd lost to hate. He talked about the one relationship he'd had, a quiet romance in his 20s that ended when his partner left town, too afraid to live openly. Jamie listened, his face a mix of anger and sadness. Not at Caleb, but at the world that had forced him to hide. "This is why Sarah's words hurt so much," Caleb admitted. "She called me a freak, and it brought back everything I'd tried to bury. I thought I was past it, but I wasn't." Jamie's jaw tightened. "She used that against you. She knew you'd stay quiet, that you wouldn't fight back. But you're fighting now, and so am I." Caleb nodded, a fire kindling in his chest. Coming out to Jamie wasn't just about honesty. It was about reclaiming his own strength. Sarah had preyed on his silence, but he wasn't silent anymore. They had a court date, evidence, and Maria's expertise. It was time to fight. The next week was a blur of preparation. Maria coached them on their testimonies, warning that Sarah's lawyer would try to twist Caleb's role in Jamie's life. "They'll say you're overbearing, that you manipulated Jamie to keep the house," she said. "You need to show the court who you area-devoted guardian, not a control freak." Caleb spent hours writing his statement, pouring his heart into every word. He described the day he took Jamie in, the sleepless nights after his sister's death, the joy of watching Jamie grow. He wrote about the house, not just as property, but as a sanctuary for their family. Jamie did the same, his words raw and honest, detailing how Sarah had manipulated him, preyed on his insecurities about moving forward. But Sarah wasn't idle. She'd launched a smear campaign, spreading rumors in Willow Creek that Caleb was unstable, that he'd brainwashed Jamie. Neighbors who'd once waved hello now avoided his eyes. At the local diner, Caleb overheard whispers, "Poor Jamie. Stuck with that uncle." It stung, but Caleb refused to let it break him. He had Jamie, and that was enough. The night before the court date, Caleb found Jamie in the backyard again, staring at the carved fence. "I keep thinking about Mom and Dad," Jamie said. "They'd hate Thysis fighting over their house. But they'd be proud of you, Caleb, for stepping up, for being there." Caleb's eyes stung. "They'd be proud of you too," he said. "You're stronger than you know." Jamie turned to him, his expression fierce. "We're not losing this house. And we're not losing each other. I don't care what Sarah says or what anyone thinks. You're my family." Caleb nodded, his heart full. For the first time in weeks, he felt like they were a team again. But as they walked back inside, the for sale sign caught his eye, a reminder of the battle ahead. Sarah's lawyer was ruthless, and the buyer, a wealthy developer, had deep pockets. The odds were stacked against them, but Caleb had something Sarah didn't: love, unshakable and fierce. The morning of the court date, Caleb woke early, his stomach in knots. He dressed in his best shirt, one Jamie had bought him for his 40th birthday. As he looked in the mirror, he saw not just an uncle, but a father, a fighter. He was ready to face Sarah, to face the truth, and to fight for their home. But as he stepped outside, his phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Sarah's got a new witness. Be prepared." Caleb's heart sank. He didn't know who it was, but he knew Sarah. She didn't play fair. And whatever she had planned, it was going to hurt. The courtroom was colder than Caleb expected, the wooden benches hard against his back. He sat beside Jamie, their shoulders brushing, a silent anchor in the storm. Maria stood at the front, her posture confident, but Caleb's eyes were on Sarah, who sat across the aisle, her face a mask of calm. She didn't look at them, her gaze fixed on her lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit. The new witness Maria had warned about was a mystery, and Caleb's gut churned with dread. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled tight, called the session to order. Maria presented their case first, laying out Sarah's fraud, the hidden bank account, the unauthorized loan, the emails plotting to sell the house. She painted a clear picture of manipulation, her voice steady as she introduced the documents. Caleb watched the judge's face, searching for a reaction, but it was unreadable. Then it was Sarah's turn. Her lawyer, Richard Vance, stood with a smirk, his voice dripping with confidence. "Your Honor, this case isn't about fraud. It's about a young man trying to move on with his life and an overbearing uncle who refuses to let go." He gestured at Caleb, his words sharp. "Caleb Turner has controlled Jamie's life for years, living in a house that isn't his, stifling Jamie's future. My client simply acted in her fiancé's best interests." Caleb's fists clenched under the table. Jamie reached for his hand, squeezing it, but the accusation stung. Vance called Sarah to the stand, and she played her part perfectly, tears in her eyes, voice trembling as she described Caleb's unhealthy attachment to Jamie. "He's always been too close," she said, her voice soft but venomous. "It's not normal. Jamie deserves a life of his own." Caleb wanted to shout, to call out her lies, but Maria's hand on his arm kept him grounded. Jamie's testimony came next, and he stood tall, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. Caleb raised me when I had no one, he said. He's my family, not a burden. Sarah manipulated me, used my trust to take our home. I thought I loved her, but I was wrong. The courtroom was silent, the weight of Jamie's words hanging heavy. Caleb's chest swelled with pride, but it was short-lived. Vance stood again, his smile cold. Your Honor, I'd like to call our final witness, Ellen Harper. Caleb's blood ran cold. Ellen was his sister's best friend, a woman who'd known Caleb and Jamie for years. She'd been at every birthday, every holiday, until she moved away a decade ago. What could she possibly say? Ellen took the stand, her face lined with age, her eyes avoiding Caleb's. Vance didn't waste time. Ms. Harper, can you describe Caleb Turner's relationship with his nephew? Ellen hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. Caleb was devoted. He loved Jamie like a son. But he was private, closed off. He never told anyone much about his life, not even my friend his sister. There were rumors, back then, about Caleb, about who he was. Caleb's heart stopped. He knew what was coming, but hearing it in open court was like a blade to the chest. Vance leaned in. What rumors? Ms. Harper. Ellen's voice dropped. People said he was gay, that he hid it. I don't know if it's true, but it made people talk, made them question why he was so attached to Jamie. The courtroom buzzed, and Caleb felt every eye on him. Jamie's hand tightened on his, but Caleb couldn't look at him. Sarah had found his deepest secret and weaponized it, dragging Ellen into her scheme. Vance pressed further. Did these rumors suggest Caleb's attachment to Jamie was inappropriate? Ellen shook her head quickly. No, never. Caleb was a good guardian. He loved Jamie. But the rumors, they made people wonder. Maria objected, calling the testimony irrelevant. But the damage was done. Sarah's lawyer had planted the seed. Caleb was a secretive, potentially unstable man clinging to a boy who wasn't his. The judge called a recess, and Caleb stumbled outside, his breath shallow. Jamie followed, his face pale. She's lying, he said. Ellen didn't mean it like that. Sarah got to her. Caleb nodded, but the words echoed in his mind. Freak. Inappropriate. Not normal. He'd spent his life hiding to avoid this judgment, and now it was laid bare. Maria joined them, her face grim. They're playing dirty, but we expected that. Your testimony is next. Caleb, you need to tell the truth, all of it. Show them who you are. Caleb's stomach twisted. He'd come out to Jamie, but the world, that was different. He'd seen what exposure did in a small town. But as he looked at Jamie, at the house key still on his keychain, he knew he had no choice. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about proving he was the man Jamie believed in. Back in the courtroom, Caleb took the stand, his hands steady despite the storm inside. He told his story, raising Jamie, sacrificing his own dreams, loving him like a son. And then, with a deep breath, he said it. I'm gay. I've hidden it my whole life. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I wanted to protect Jamie. I didn't want my truth to be a burden. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm his family, and that house is our home. The room was silent, but Caleb felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted. Jamie's eyes shone with pride, and even Maria gave him a small nod. Sarah's face, though, was unreadable. Caleb knew she wasn't done. She'd twist his truth, use it against him. But for the first time, he was ready to fight as himself. No secrets, no shame. Caleb stepped down from the stand, his legs unsteady but his heart resolute. The courtroom silence felt like a held breath, and for the first time, he didn't care what anyone thought. He'd told his truth, and Jamie's proud smile was all that mattered. But Sarah's lawyer, Vance, wasn't finished. His closing argument was a masterclass in manipulation, painting Caleb as a man who'd overstayed his welcome, a relic of Jamie's past who refused to let go. "This isn't about love," Vance said, his voice smooth. "It's about control. Caleb Turner can't accept that Jamie has a new family now." Maria countered fiercely, her voice cutting through the haze. "This case is about fraud, Your Honor. Sarah exploited Jamie's trust, stole his inheritance, and slandered a man who gave everything for his nephew. Caleb's personal life is irrelevant. What matters is the evidence, her accounts, her emails, her lies." The judge adjourned for deliberation, promising a ruling within days. Caleb and Jamie left the courthouse, the weight of uncertainty heavy on their shoulders. Outside, the Seattle sky was gray, but the air felt cleaner, as if Caleb's confession had cleared something within him. Jamie walked close, their steps in sync. "You were amazing up there," Jamie said. "I'm proud of you." Caleb managed a small smile. "I just told the truth. Should have done it years ago." They stopped at a diner near the house, a place they'd gone to for years. Over coffee and pie, Jamie opened up about Sarah. "I loved her," he said, his voice raw. "Or I thought I did. But looking back, it was always about what she wanted: control, money, status. I was too blind to see it." Caleb reached across the table, squeezing Jamie's hand. "You're not blind. You're human. You trusted her, and she betrayed you. That's on her, not you." Jamie nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I keep thinking about what Ellen said. Those rumors, did you ever hear them? Did people really think that about you?" Caleb sighed, stirring his coffee. "Yeah, I heard them. Small towns talk. I ignored it, kept my head down. I didn't want it to touch you." Jamie's face hardened. "It shouldn't have been like that. You shouldn't have had to hide." Caleb shrugged, but the words warmed him. Jamie's acceptance was a gift, one he hadn't realized he needed. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other's hearts. But as they left, Caleb's phone buzzed with a voicemail from Maria. "Call me. We've got a problem." Back home, Maria's news hit like a punch. The buyer, a developer named Greg Larson, was pushing to close the sale early. He'd offered the judge a compromise: let the sale go through, but give Caleb and Jamie a small payout to relocate. Sarah was behind it, Maria suspected, pulling strings to ensure they lost the house. "She's desperate," Maria said over the phone. "She knows we've got her on fraud, so she's rushing the sale to make it irreversible. We need to stall, find something to discredit Larson." Caleb's mind raced. Larson was a local big shot, known for flipping properties and turning neighborhoods into soulless condos. If he got their house, it'd be torn down, replaced with something cold and modern. The thought made Caleb sick. He and Jamie spent the evening digging online, searching for dirt on Larson. They found complaints, shady deals, corner cutting, but nothing concrete enough to use in court. The next day, a surprise came from an unexpected source: Ellen Harper. She showed up at the house, her face pale, her hands wringing. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "Sarah called me last month, said she needed help protecting Jamie. She fed me lies about you, Caleb. I didn't know the whole story." Caleb's anger flared, but he saw the guilt in her eyes. "Why'd you do it?" he asked. "You knew me. You knew us." Ellen's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was helping Jamie. Sarah said you were holding him back. That you were unstable. I should have talked to you first. I want to make it right. Jamie stepped forward, his voice firm. Then help us now. Tell the court the truth that Sarah manipulated you, just like she did me. Ellen nodded, promising to submit a new statement to Maria. It wasn't a silver bullet, but it was something. Caleb felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by fear. The judge's ruling was days away, and Larson's offer loomed like a guillotine. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He wandered the house, touching the walls, the memories. He stopped at the fireplace, where a photo of him and Jamie sat, taken on Jamie's 18th birthday. They were laughing, carefree. Caleb vowed to fight until the end. The next morning, Maria called with a breakthrough. Larson's got a history of bribing officials. She said, "It's not public, but I've got a contact who's digging deeper. If we can tie him to Sarah, we might stop this." Caleb hung up, his heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place, but time was running out. He looked at Jamie, who was reading Ellen's new statement, his face set with determination. They were in this together, and no matter what happened, Caleb knew one thing: they'd face it as family. The days before the judge's ruling were a blur of tension and hope. Caleb and Jamie worked tirelessly with Maria, poring over every document, every lead. Maria's contact came through with a bombshell, a paper trail linking Greg Larson to questionable payments to a city official, tied to a previous development deal. It wasn't directly connected to their case, but it was enough to cast doubt on Larson's credibility. Maria filed an emergency motion to present the evidence, arguing that Larson's involvement with Sarah warranted further investigation. Caleb felt the weight of every decision, every moment that had led them here. He'd spent years avoiding conflict, hiding his truth to keep their life stable. Now, he was in the fight of his life, not just for the house, but for the family he and Jamie had built. The thought of losing it all to Sarah, to Larson, to their own mistakes was unbearable. Jamie, too, was changing. The betrayal had hardened him, but it also brought clarity. He spent hours talking to Caleb, not just about the case, but about their lives. "I want you to be happy," Jamie said one night, sitting on the porch as the stars blinked above. "Not just for me, but for you. You deserve that." Caleb's chest tightened. He'd never thought about his own happiness. Not really. His life had been about Jamie's safety, his future. But Jamie's words stirred something, a longing he'd buried long ago. "Maybe when this is over," Caleb said, his voice soft. "Maybe I'll try." The day of the ruling arrived, a crisp morning that felt too ordinary for the weight it carried. Caleb and Jamie dressed in silence, their hands brushing as they adjusted each other's ties. At the courthouse, Maria met them with a determined nod. "We've done everything we can," she said. "Now it's up to the judge." Sarah was there, her face a mask of confidence, but Caleb noticed the tension in her jaw. Larson sat in the back, his presence a silent threat. The judge entered, her expression as unreadable as ever. She began with the facts: Sarah's fraudulent actions, the emails, the bank records. Caleb's heart pounded as she addressed his role. "Mr. Turner's personal life has been unnecessarily scrutinized," she said, her voice firm. "His dedication to his nephew is not a flaw, but a testament to his character." Caleb exhaled, Jamie's hand finding his under the table. The judge continued, her words measured. "The evidence of MS. Sarah Thompson's fraud is compelling. The unauthorized loan and hidden accounts violate the trust inherent in her engagement to Mr. Jamie Reynolds. However, the sale of the property to Mr. Larson is legally binding unless further evidence of collusion is presented." Caleb's stomach dropped. Maria's new evidence hadn't been admitted, it was too late. Deemed circumstantial. The judge offered a compromise. The sale would proceed. But Jamie would receive a portion of the profits. And Caleb would be compensated for his contributions to the property. It wasn't enough. The house would still be gone. Sarah's smile was faint but triumphant. Jamie's face crumpled, and Caleb felt his own heart break. They'd fought so hard, but it wasn't enough. As the gavel fell, Caleb pulled Jamie close, whispering, "We're not done. We'll find a way." Outside, Maria was furious. "This isn't over," she said. "We can appeal, dig deeper into Larson's deals. There's something there. I know it." But Jamie was quiet, his eyes distant. "I failed you," he said, his voice breaking. "This was my fault. I let her in." Caleb grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look up. "You didn't fail me. You're my kid, Jamie. This house site's just a thing. We're what matters." Jamie nodded, tears falling, but Caleb saw the doubt in his eyes. They drove home in silence, the "for sale" sign mocking them as they pulled into the driveway. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He wandered the house, touching every surface, every memory. He stopped at the backyard fence, running his fingers over Jamie's carved name. This was their home, their history. He couldn't let it go. The next morning, a letter arrived, slipped under the door. It was from Ellen, handwritten and heavy with guilt. "I found something," it read. "Sarah met with Larson months ago, before the engagement. They planned this together. Check the county records, there's a permit application with both their names." Caleb's heart raced. He called Maria, who was already on her way. "If this is true," she said, "we've got them. This could void the sale." Caleb looked at Jamie, who was reading the letter, his eyes wide with hope. They weren't done fighting. Sarah and Larson had underestimated them, but Caleb and Jamie were family, and family didn't give up. As the sun rose over Willow Creek, Caleb felt a fire he hadn't known in years. This wasn't just about a house site, it was about justice, about love, about proving that no one could tear them apart. The discovery of Ellen's letter lit a spark in Caleb and Jamie, a final chance to reclaim their home. Maria dove into the county records, her fingers flying across her laptop as she hunted for the permit application Ellen mentioned. By midday, she found it, a document filed 6 months before Jamie's engagement, listing Sarah and Greg Larson as co-applicants for a development permit on the property. It was the proof they needed. Sarah hadn't just manipulated Jamie. She'd conspired with Larson from the start to flip the house for profit. Maria filed an appeal immediately, attaching the new evidence. "This changes everything," she told Caleb and Jamie over coffee at the house. "It shows intent, collusion. The judge can't ignore this. We're requesting an emergency stay to stop the sale." Caleb's hands shook as he held the mug, hope warring with fear. He'd been through too many disappointments to trust this fully, but the look in Jamie's eyes, fierce, determined, kept him grounded. "We're getting our home back," Jamie said, his voice steady. "For Mom and Dad. For us." The appeal hearing was set for the following week, the fastest Maria could push it. Caleb and Jamie spent the days preparing, gathering every scrap of evidence they could. Neighbors, moved by their story, came forward with stories of Larson's strong-arm tactics in other deals. A local reporter caught wind of the case, publishing a piece that painted Sarah and Larson as predators exploiting a grieving family. The tide was turning, but Caleb knew it wasn't over. The night before the hearing, Caleb found Jamie in the backyard, carving something new into the fence beside his childhood name. It was a single word, Dad. Caleb's breath caught, tears prickling his eyes. "You've always been this to me," Jamie said, his voice thick. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I need you to know that." Caleb pulled him into a hug, the weight of years melting away. "You're my son," he said. "Always will be." For the first time, he felt whole, not just an uncle, not a secret, but a father, unashamed and unafraid. The hearing was electric, the courtroom packed with neighbors and reporters. Maria presented the new evidence with precision, her voice cutting through Sarah's lawyer's objections. The permit application was damning, showing Sarah and Larson's plan predated her relationship with Jamie. Ellen took the stand again, her voice steady as she admitted her mistake and confirmed Sarah's manipulation. "I was wrong," she said, looking at Caleb. "He's a good man, a good father." Sarah's composure cracked. She whispered furiously to Vance, who scrambled to deflect, claiming the permit was a misunderstanding. But the judge wasn't swayed. She ruled in favor of Caleb and Jamie, voiding the sale due to fraud and collusion. The house was theirs again, and Sarah was ordered to repay the unauthorized loan, facing potential criminal charges. As the gavel fell, Jamie let out a sob, and Caleb pulled him close, tears streaming down his own face. The crowd cheered, but all Caleb heard was Jamie's heartbeat, steady and strong. They'd won not just the house, but their family, their truth. Sarah left the courtroom without a word, her plans in ruins. Larson stormed out, his empire shaken. Caleb and Jamie drove home, the for sale sign gone, replaced by a sense of peace. That night, they sat in the living room, surrounded by memories, and talked about the future. Jamie wanted to stay in Willow Creek, to rebuild his life. Caleb, for the first time, thought about his own maybe dating, maybe living openly as himself. Months later, the house was alive again, filled with laughter and new beginnings. Caleb joined a local LGBTQ support group, finding friends who understood his journey. Jamie, healing from Sarah's betrayal, started volunteering at a youth center, helping kids like he once was. The fence in the backyard stood proud, Dad carved beside Jamie's name, a testament to their bond. One evening, as they grilled burgers in the yard, Jamie raised a glass. "To family," he said, his eyes shining. Caleb clinked his glass, his heart full. They'd faced loss, betrayal, and judgment, but they'd come through stronger, together. The house was more than a home. No, it was a symbol of love, resilience, and the courage to be true. And as the sun set over Willow Creek, Caleb knew, no matter what came next, they'd face it as father and son.